In this podcast episode, Dr. Nick Maynard, a cancer surgeon and medical professor from Oxford University, shares his firsthand experiences and eyewitness accounts from Gaza. Through his involvement in providing medical care and training in the region since 2010, he offers detailed testimony about the humanitarian crisis, widespread destruction, targeted attacks on healthcare infrastructure, and grave human rights violations, including torture and executions by Israeli forces. The discussion extensively covers the impact of military assaults, the collapse of medical services, and the political and media dynamics surrounding the ongoing conflict. Dr. Maynard's connection to Gaza began over a decade ago, initially through invitations to teach medical students at various Palestinian universities, including in the West Bank and Gaza. He was struck by the resilience, generosity, and kindness of the Palestinian people, particularly in Gaza, despite living under harsh conditions characterized by occupation and restrictions on movement. Maynard highlights that Gaza, often described as a large prison or concentration camp, effectively confines nearly all its residents with almost no opportunity to leave. Before October 2023, Gaza's healthcare system was already severely compromised by years of blockade and repeated military bombings. Despite limited resources, Gaza's hospitals maintained a high standard of medical practice, with talented doctors and nurses providing care under challenging circumstances. However, advanced treatments, especially for complex conditions like cancer, often required patients to apply for permits to receive care outside Gaza, with many being rejected or forced to travel alone. Dr. Maynard notes the bureaucratic delays and denials invariably caused preventable deaths. Throughout his visits since 2010, Dr. Maynard has witnessed relentless aerial bombardments by the Israeli military on Gaza, resulting in widespread damage to civilian infrastructure, including hospitals and residential areas. The patterns of destruction intensified following major military operations such as the 2008 and 2014 assaults. He explains that the current conflict saw unprecedented destruction, with hospitals repeatedly targeted, medical staff killed or detained, and facilities rendered inoperable. The damage includes critical shortages of sterile supplies, running water, electricity, and medical equipment, severely hindering patient care. Maynard provides harrowing accounts of healthcare personnel being specifically targeted by Israeli forces. Nearly 2,000 healthcare workers have been killed during the recent conflict, a casualty rate far exceeding other war zones. Many others have been abducted, tortured, and detained without charges in Israeli prisons. He details testimonies of severe physical and psychological torture inflicted on medical staff, including prolonged beatings, electroshock, sexual assault, and denial of basic rights, often leading to death. Executions of detained doctors, including shootings of plastic surgeons and mass killings of patients handcuffed in hospitals, are described as part of a deliberate tactic to cripple Gaza's healthcare infrastructure. Dr. Maynard describes the use of high-energy explosive weapons against civilian populations, a pattern typically seen only in open battlefield combat. The widespread injuries from shrapnel and fragmentation missiles cause devastating physical trauma, with many patients requiring complex surgical interventions. He recounts treating women and children with severe wounds caused by these weapons and witnessing the appalling conditions under which this care is delivered, including shortages of pain relief and nutritional support. The physician refutes claims by certain organizations suggesting that starvation is not occurring in Gaza. He testifies to the reality of a strict blockade imposed for months, cutting off essential supplies, including food and medical nutrition. The consequences of malnutrition among wounded patients are dire, severely reducing their chances of survival. The Gaza Humanitarian Foundation's efforts to distribute food are critiqued as their distribution points became dangerous sites where unarmed civilians, including children, were shot by Israeli soldiers during chaotic queuing. Maynard and his colleagues witnessed coordinated, targeted shootings of civilians at food distribution sites. A disturbing pattern emerged wherein groups of teenage boys were shot in specific body parts on different days, including gunshot wounds exclusively to the head, chest, abdomen, and even testicles, suggesting systematic attempts to terrorize and disable the population. He also reports the use of remote-controlled quadcopter drones equipped with cameras and guns to attack civilians, including inside hospitals and tents, further demonstrating sophisticated and deliberate targeting of non-combatants. Despite his professional exposure to trauma through cancer surgery, Dr. Maynard acknowledges the profound emotional toll of working in Gaza's hospitals amid mass casualties and extreme suffering. Witnessing children dying from injuries compounded by starvation and lack of supplies has left a lasting psychological impact on both foreign and local medical workers. The medical teams find some solace and emotional support by sharing their experiences late at night, but the trauma endures well beyond their time on the ground. Dr. Maynard criticizes the near-total suppression or distortion of what is happening in Gaza by mainstream media outlets and governments, including those in the UK and the US. Journalists who attempt to report the truth face editorial barriers or are forced to resign, while political leaders often rely on propaganda narratives that discredit Palestinian health institutions and falsely equate medical staff with militants. The weaponization of accusations of anti-Semitism serves to silence critics and humanitarian witnesses alike, fostering a climate of fear and censorship. The discussion underscores the complicity of Western governments, particularly the UK and US, in enabling and funding the ongoing violence. Dr. Maynard exposes the influence of pro-Israel lobbying and campaign financing in maintaining government policies that support Israel, including military aid and intelligence cooperation. Attempts to raise awareness and seek accountability face institutional resistance, even as evidence is presented directly to political leaders. He highlights the rare but growing voices of backbench politicians and grassroots activists who challenge the official lines. Recent Israeli policies impose strict registration and exclusion criteria on international NGOs and medical personnel, effectively barring many humanitarian organizations and their volunteers from entering Gaza or the West Bank. One such exclusion criterion is the criticism of Israel within the last 7 years, disqualifying a wide range of advocates and aid groups. These restrictions have greatly impeded medical assistance and further isolated Gaza's population amid escalating crises. Dr. Maynard provides sobering estimates of death tolls and casualties in Gaza since the onset of the current conflict. Official numbers from Gaza's Ministry of Health, recognized even by Israeli sources, state around 76,000 trauma deaths, while independent analyses, such as from The Lancet, suggest this figure could be 50% higher. Additional excess deaths from untreated chronic illnesses, starvation, and lack of medical services raise total mortality estimates to between a quarter to nearly half of Gaza's pre-war population. With only one major hospital remaining partly operational under severely degraded conditions, ongoing survival challenges are immense. The account reveals multiple documented cases of grave war crimes, including the killing of neonates left in incubators during Israeli military invasions, systematic attacks on hospitals, and the destruction of essential infrastructure needed for life-saving care. Patients frequently die from preventable causes due to fuel shortages disabling ventilators and incubators, compounded by the overall blockade and recurrent bombings of hospitals like Shifa and NASA Medical Complex. Despite significant personal risk, Dr. Maynard is committed to continuing his work and advocacy for Gaza. His family, including his wife and children, are deeply supportive of his involvement and humanitarian efforts. Their household has provided refuge for Palestinian medical students and professionals who have escaped Gaza, with some now studying at Oxford. This personal connection highlights the human bonds that sustain his dedication despite the ongoing dangers and political challenges. Maynard reflects on the complex emotions involved in witnessing such suffering and destruction, while knowing that much of the outside world remains indifferent or actively suppresses the truth. He expresses sadness and guilt at leaving Gaza, anger towards governments and media complicit in covering up abuses, and frustration at the weaponization of anti-Semitism accusations that stifle legitimate humanitarian criticism. His testimony aims to shed light on the realities concealed behind propaganda and partial narratives. Efforts by Maynard and other medical and humanitarian professionals to document and report evidence of war crimes and genocide have been submitted to international bodies such as the International Criminal Court. Despite presenting detailed photographic and testimonial evidence to politicians and officials in the UK and the US, minimal concrete actions have followed. This systemic inaction underlines the difficulty of achieving accountability in entrenched geopolitical conflicts where strategic alliances overshadow human rights concerns.